Hello and welcome to the Maths Matrix. My name's Rebecca and in this series of videos we're going to be doing percentage. Before I talk about what we're going to be doing in today's video, I first of all want to go through the different types of percentage question that you need to be able to do for an exam. That way you'll be able to mentally check whether or not you do know how to do them, and if you do already know how to do them, then you'll know which videos you can miss. So the first thing you have to be able to do is find a percentage of a quantity. That would be something really straightforward, like just find 12% of £800 or find 35% of £690. So it's literally just find a percent of another number. And you have to be able to do that ideally both without a calculator and with a calculator. The second type of percentage question would be increasing something by a given percentage. So that might be something like increase £300 by 14% or increase £480 by 35%. The third type, and the opposite of that, is decreasing by a given percentage. So decrease £600 by 42% or decrease £5,000 by 68%. The fourth type is repeated percentage change, which is sometimes called exponential growth and decay or compound growth and decay. That's typically those questions that say somebody puts some money into a bank that pays this percent interest for so many years. What will they have at the end of the time period? It can also be relating to things losing value. So a car is bought for £14,000 and it decreases in value by 12% every year. How much will it be worth at the end of 4 years? So that's those types of questions. The fifth type of percentage question that you need to be able to do is to express one quantity as a percentage of another. This is the one that people often don't know. So that would be something like express 47 as a percentage of 60, or it might be something like there are 12 animals in a vet's waiting room and 7 of them are cats. What percentage of the group are cats? So it's taking one number and expressing it as a percentage of another given number. The sixth type of percentage question is working out what is the percentage change that has occurred. So that might be something like somebody puts £4,000 into a bank and at the end of the year they've got £4,800 in the bank. What's the percentage increase? Or it could be that a piece of art cost £3,000 and then 3 years later it was only valued at £2,400. What's the percentage decrease in its value? And then the seventh type of percentage question is called reverse percentage, and that's where you're asked to look back in time and say what did something cost before the sale, what was the original value, and again that's one that people often struggle with. So those are the 7 main types of percentage question that you need to know for your exams. And if you're going for one of the higher levels, then I would say it's important to be able to do all 7, ideally both with and without a calculator, because most of the types could be on either paper. If you're not going for one of the higher levels and you're not too confident with percentage work, then I always say to my students, it's best to know some things well than everything badly. So if that's the case, I would prioritise types 1 to 4 and possibly type 7, and you could possibly afford to be not as good or to just not do types 5 and 6, but learn some of it thoroughly rather than all of it badly, is what I say to students. In this video, we're going to be looking at type 1, which is just finding a percentage of a quantity, and we're going to be doing that both without and with a calculator. I'm going to pop some questions on screen now, and if you know that you could do those both without and with a calculator, then you don't need to watch this video, you can just skip to the next one. If you're not sure how to do the questions, then stick with the video and we'll cover that. If you're still here, then I'm assuming you didn't know how to do all those questions, so let's get started. For this video, you'll be needing paper, a pen, and a calculator. Assuming you've got those with you, put a title of percentages, and then put a subtitle of Type 1, Finding a percent of a quantity. And then put Method 1, Non-Calc. And then put Find 10% and use this to help. E.g. find 15% of £620. Okay, so to do this, we would first of all find 10% of £620, and finding 10% is super easy because you just divide by 10. So if you didn't already know that, then off to one side you can just put to find 10% divide by 10. But that's what we're going to do there. We're going to divide 620 by 10 to say 10% equals £62. Now we're being asked to find 15%, so if I take half of 10%, that'll give me 5%. So if I've halved 10% to get 5%, then I need to halve 62 to give 31. And what that means is that I can add those together, and that will give me 15% equals £93. And that would be the final answer. If we do another one, if you put e.g. find 35% of £480. So we would find 10% by dividing 480 by 10. So 10% is £48. So 5% will be half of that, which is £24. Now I need 35%, so I can now times that 10 by 3. So 48 times 3 will give me 30%. I'll just pop that at the front actually. 30% equals 48 times 3. Now, if you didn't know what that was in your head, you'd just do it off to one side using long multiplication. So 3 8s are 24, 3 4s are 12, 13, 14. So 30% equals 48 times 3 equals £144. And that means that 35% equals £144 plus £24. In other words, the 30% plus that 5% there, which is £168. Okay, let's do another slightly harder one. So if you put e.g. find 12% of let's have £150. So find 12% of £150. Now we'll start in the same way as before. So 10% will equal that divided by 10, which is going to be £15. Now this time that doesn't end in a 5, so finding 5% isn't going to be useful in this case. But what I can do is find 1%. So if I divide that 10% by 10, that'll give me 1%. So if I divide £15 by 10, that'll give me £1.50. Imagining a decimal point bouncing one place in. So 10% is £15, 1% is a tenth of that, is £1.50. Now if I add 10% and 1% and another 1% together, that'll give me the 12% that I need. So for ease, I'll just write another £1.50 underneath there. And adding all those together will give me 12%. £1.50 and £1.50 make £3, and adding that on to 15 makes £18. And that will be the final answer. If it's not easy enough to do in your head the bits that you're adding, then you'll have to write it out again more neatly. So really, if I'd been doing that properly, I would have set out a new column with all the decimal points lined up and all the columns lined up nicely so that I could add it more properly. But that one was easy enough that I didn't need to do that. I could just do it in my head. All right. Let's do another slightly harder one. So we'll have e.g. find 1.5% of £280. Now, 10% will equal £28. So 1% will equal £2.80, dividing the 28 by 10, which is like bouncing a decimal point one place in. 0.5%, so 0.5%, will be half of 1%. So I can now halve £2.80 to give me £1.40. And 1.5% will be that 1% and that 0.5% added together. So I don't need that 10% now. I can just cross that off. And I'm going to add those bits together. 0 plus 0 is 0. 8 plus 4 is 12. Decimal point below the decimal point. 2 and 1 and 4. 2 and 1 and 1 make 4. So the answer will be £4.20 to that one. All right. So really, if you find 10%, I call it the 10% chunking method, but if you find that 10%, then you can variously halve it to find 5%, divide it by 10 to find 1%, and if you have 1%, you can halve that to find 0.5%, and using chunks of 10s, 5s, 1s and halves, you should be able to make all the other percents that you might need. So it's really just a case of dividing and then adding chunks together until you get what you need on a non-calculator question, okay? Now I'm not going to give you any of your own to practice at this point because at the end of the video there's going to be a sheet with lots and lots on, so you'll get plenty of practice then. So if you just now continue with your notes and put method 2, calculator method. And then put change the percent to a decimal and of to times. So, e.g., find 19% of £573. Now 19% means 19 1/100ths. And as a decimal, that's 0.19. So we change the percent into a decimal, we change of to times, and we leave the number just as it is. And then we put that into the calculator, okay? So if I just grab my calculator, 0.19 times 573 equals 108.87. And that will be the final answer, okay? Some people like to use the fraction instead of the decimal. If you're already happy using fractions and that's just your way of doing it instead of using a decimal, that's absolutely fine. I find it a little bit clunky on my calculator to use a fraction. It just takes a little bit longer, so I prefer to just use the decimal because it's quicker. But if you're not very comfortable changing percentages into decimals and you prefer to use the fractions button on your calculator, then by all means do. There's actually lots of different ways that you can find percentages of quantities, and I'm just going to teach one way with a calculator and one way without a calculator for all of the types of questions that we're going to do. But if you already are happy with an alternative type, then by all means use your alternative type as long as you keep getting the right answers. But if you don't have a type of your own that you're confident with, then I'm just going to show you the decimal way because it tends to be the quickest way. I'm actually going to bring my calculator up close to the screen and let you have a look at it because we've not done any calculator work yet, and it's important that in your exam you know how to use your calculator confidently. So I'm going to show you the model that I like, that I would recommend, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when I input that into my calculator, what pops back out again. I'll also show you the fraction button alternative that you can use if you do prefer the fractions way and you don't like the decimal way. So, my calculator is a Casio and it's an FX85 GT Plus. It's quite old. I don't know if they still make this exact model, but they'll certainly, if they don't make this exact model, have upgraded it with something very similar. There's more basic calculators that aren't suitable for GCSE because they don't do enough, and then there's fancy calculators that do far too much and aren't actually allowed in GCSE exams. But when you go into just a general stationery shop or maybe online to buy a calculator, it will usually say somewhere that it's allowed in GCSE exams, and often it will say the most popular choice for GCSE exams, and I really recommend Casios. They're the ones that most schools I think recommend actually. I mean, at some schools I think they actually give you your calculator, and if they do, it's most likely I think to be a Casio. I'm not sponsored by Casio, by the way, I'm just telling you that this is what I like and what I recommend. Now, when I put that calculation in there, I won't be able to do this backwards, I don't think, but I put 0.15 times 573 into the calculator so that it looked like that. And then when I pressed equals, I didn't get a plain number out, I got a fraction like that. To change that fraction into a number, there's a little button above the orange buttons, and one of them says S_D. I'm not sure if it's focusing or not, but if you then press that SROD button, it gives you a plain number, and it's the plain number that you will give as your answer in a question like this, okay? Now, if you prefer the fractions way of doing the question, on a Casio, it would be that button there. It's like a little square with a line, and then another little square underneath it. I don't think it's focusing, sorry. But it's that button, and you would press that button and on the screen it would pop up a square and a line and a square. Now on the top you would put 19, and then you would press the down arrow to take you to the bottom box, and on the bottom box you would put 100, so now you have 19 100ths. Then what you would do is press the right hand arrow, and it's important that you press the right hand arrow because if you don't, your calculator will just keep typing under the line, and what we want it to do is come to the side of the fraction before we multiply, because we're multiplying the whole fraction by what comes next. And then I could put in the 573 like before. So in this case I'm doing 19 100ths times 573. And then I would press equals and it would give me the same answer as before in fraction form. and then I would press the S to D button above those orange buttons there, and it would give me the proper answer. Okay? Now, I think that's quite a clunky way on these calculators of doing it. It looks, you know, the fraction and the times does look straightforward on the display, but it's just quite a lot of arrow pressing, and if you forget to do the arrow press, you'll get the wrong answer. So unless you're very secure in using the fractions way and you just do not want at this stage to change to a decimal, then personally I would go with the decimal way because it's quicker and you don't have to think about pressing your arrows in the right places. But if you do want to use the fractions button instead, then there it is on a Casio. I've seen some models of calculators where the fractions button has been so complicated to operate that I haven't known how to do it, which is why I recommend Casios, because it is quite straightforward. Although clunky, it's easy to work out what to do. Some other calculators, not so much. Right, now I've finished lecturing you about calculators, let's do another one. So let's have e.g. find 39% of £1,062. Okay. So you could do this using the 10% chunking method, but you'd just have a lot of working out to do. It wouldn't be as straightforward as the ones we were doing earlier because there's no zero on the end, so you'd be dealing with decimals straight away. And then to get to 39%, you'd need either 40% and 1%, so you could do a takeaway, or you'd need 10%, which you'd then need to times by 3 to give you 30%, and then you'd need 5%, which you could add on to make 35%, and you'd need 1%, which you'd need to times by 4, so that you could add up 30 and 5 and 4 to make 39%, and it would just be messy. So on a calculator, it's much quicker because we change the percent into a decimal, so into 0.39. the of into a times, and then 1062, and we would just put that straight into the calculator. So 0.39 times 1062 equals 414.18, and that would be the final answer. Again, if you were doing it on a fractions button, you would put it in as 39 over 100 times 1062. So you can do it the fractions way, but the decimal way is quicker. Let's do a slightly harder example. So if we have e.g. find 72.5% of 6,134. As you can see, I'm being very creative today. They're all just in currency. I've not made up any stories around them for these. But on an exam, to be honest, if it was just find percent of quantity, there probably wouldn't be a story. It probably would literally just say find this percent of that number. And it's the kind of question you'd encounter more on a foundation paper, because on a higher tier paper, they would probably need you to do the finding a percent of something in order to then do a problem solving question of some kind. So a straightforward find percent of quantity question will probably be on a foundation paper and just be phrased like that. Now, to change this into a decimal, we need to bounce that decimal point 2 places to give us 0.725. So this time our decimal's got 3 components to it. Change the of to a times, 6134, and in that would go to the calculator. So 0.725 times 6134 equals 4447.15. All right. If you were going with a fraction in this case, you would have 72.5 over 100. Let's do another slightly harder example. So if we have e.g. find 4% of £18.36. Now, these are the ones that often trip people up. So be careful, because if people are being careless, they say, oh, 4% is 0.4. But actually, 40% is 0.4, because 40% would be 40 out of 100, which would cancel down to 4/10, which is 0.4. So 4% can't possibly be 0.4, because 40% is 0.4. So with 4%, the inference is that there's a decimal point on the end of the 4. And to convert that percent into a decimal, we would bounce the decimal point 2 places, which would give us not 0.4, but 0.04. So 0.04 times by 18.36 would go into the calculator. And that gives an answer of 0.7344. And as we're working in currency for the question, the units would be pounds, and we would have to round to 2 decimal places. They're very fond, because people make the 4% is 0.4 mistake, and it's so easy to do. You're never really too good to make that mistake. You always have to sort of think, oh wait, no it's not. So they're very fond of giving questions where you have a 4% or a 5%, especially interest rates on compound interest, because they want to see, do people make that mistake? That's all there is to finding percentages of quantities. So if you're on a non-calculator paper, then you find 10% and use that to help you. And if you're on a calculator paper, then the quickest way is to change the percentage to a decimal of to times and just put it into the calculator. But if you have been using fractions at school and you prefer to change the percentage to a fraction and of to times, then you can do it that way as well. I just think it's a bit slower. I'm going to pop some questions on screen now, and hopefully you'll be able to do them. I've asked you to do each of them firstly without a calculator to practice the 10% chunking method, and then with a calculator to practice that, and that should serve as a check as to whether or not you got them right. I'm also going to put some solutions up though, so that you can mark them as well. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video and found it useful, I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing to the channel or leaving me a thumbs up. And I'll see you in part 2, where we'll be doing increasing by a given percentage and decreasing by a given percentage. Thank you.